Yeah, so we are recording now, Malaprop.
Fabulous.
So yeah, so how are you all doing? How are you all doing today?
Good.
Good.
Yeah, good. It's a good day. Nice to have a purpose at 11:30 in the morning.
We're winning now. You know, we're ahead of the game.
And how, in general, are you managing all this?
I'm writing a lot of
Good.
postcards. Yeah.
Say again, Carla?
I'm writing a lot of postcards. I've been writing letters and stuff to all my friends, which has been a nice way to do things. And I've been doing a lot of yoga, and that's it, basically, all the time.
I discovered that I can sit on the windowsill of my first floor windows. So I did that yesterday and just sat in the sun for like 3 hours, and it was glorious. So yeah, I think that's given me like a massive boost, which is good.
I think I'm fine, and then I do something kind of stir crazy, like shave a little bit of my head, which I'm not sharing. But there's some moments where I kind of catch myself mid-activity. I'm like, no, not this.
I think Googling hair dye kits for the beard.
Yeah. I look forward to do a follow-up just for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sure, Molly has been making the papers.
Yeah.
I've been making the papers, and in between times having like teenage style freak outs at my parents, and then catching myself be like, why am I annoyed at them? This doesn't make any sense.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
What about you, V?
I'm on the Zoom all the time, it feels. So for the long weekend, I'm going to try not to do that. Just try and do the family ones. And I'm going to try not work for 4 days. So yeah, I'm going to see how that goes. I'd love to do something like even write something that's not a policy or a request or an invoice. So yeah, or even just take out my pastels and draw or something. In the yard, like I have a little yard. I'm lucky to have a yard, so I'm going to try and make it nicer and care for the little plants that I have going and things like that. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And I might socially distance visit me family if possible. Yeah. Because I haven't. It's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
I've been begging my granny.
As if we need to say that again.
Please point the day, just to reiterate. Still weird. Still weird.
Still surreal.
Yeah.
Okay, so
sunny weather makes it feel more surreal.
Say again, Molly?
Sunny weather makes it feel more surreal, I think. It makes it, because it's so nice, and it makes it feel like we're in some sort of creepy movie, like where it's all, the world is ending, but it's also really lovely.
Yeah. It makes it all like, it's a total dissonance in your mind. Yeah. So Fatima Groups United Culture Club, we're hoping to see Hot House, and obviously they didn't get to see that, so you haven't really met them in real life yet, but you were on the list obviously as project artists and because they were coming to see your work. So I thought we'd just start with a little introduction about who you are, how you met, when you started working together, why, that kind of thing.
Sure. Well, I'm Claire, I'm the director, and I suppose we initially formed to create my funnier piece. I was doing a drama degree, and I had worked with everybody as individuals or some sort of different dynamic collaborations at some point, but we'd never worked all together as a unit, and it was very unofficial. It was just for this project, and that project then became Love Plus, which is our first show, and we brought it to Fringe, and it won an award, which was both to remount that show and commission a new one. So then we thought maybe it's worth sort of officiating this a little bit. And since then we've made, 4 shows that people have seen. It feels like we've got more because like Hot House was very close to production and a few other little bits, but we tend to make work that is, kind of nerdy, a bit silly, try to keep it kind of fun and often quite future thinking. I don't know if anyone wants to chime in there, but yeah, so we were all once very Dublin based, and now it's a little bit less so, but that's kind of where we make our work primarily.
Lovely. Anyone else?
I think that covers it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Will we introduce ourselves, or are we just?
Yeah, that was lovely, John.
Oh, fuck! I'll go next then. I'm John. I do the lighting design with Malaprop, and I also do technical and kind of production management work. A bit. So yeah, that's what I do a lot. A lot of kind of technically figuring out the tricks that we do where possible and making sure people can be seen.
I'll go next
Very
because I have
good.
a prop. I'm Meg. I'm an actor and theatre maker in Malaprop. This is my dog Harley. She has a sore paw. I just wanted to share her and her comb today. So I was. I guess originally Claire had asked me to be in that very first college-related show, Love Plus, and then I just never left, really.
Lovely. Dylan?
Hiya, I'm Dylan. I co-devise with Malaprop, and I think my day job is as a playwright, so I think I tend to assume responsibility for the words end of things. But I think the way the Malaprop thing, and one of the maybe the distinctive things about the Malaprop process is that I have lots of control over the words, but only after we've had really, really, really long sort of in-depth conversations about what it might be and what way we sort of want to point it. And I think, I don't know, the metaphor we've used for that before is sort of a bit like laying train tracks more so than cycling or walking or driving, which is that once you know what direction you're going in, it's really fast, but it's really, really slow to go back. So that it's worth your while sort of taking a long time to work out that you're definitely going in the direction you want to go in before you start sort of putting down the tracks. So that's what I do.
Lovely. Thanks, Dylan.
Molly, Carla, someone jump in.
I'm Carla, and I'm the producer, so I'm mostly organising and marketing things. I was the only one who wasn't involved in the first Love Plus because we generally don't have a producer on college shows, and it was only when the guys won the prize and kind of freaked out a bit about having to do it again that I was brought on board. I wasn't a producer at that point, but I was kind of gonna give it a go. And same, haven't left since then.
Yay!
Yay!
Molly?
I am Molly. I am the designer of set and costume normally. And yeah, I joined for Love Plus and then have been working on it since then. And that's what I do, not with Malaprop as well, as also working as a set and costume designer currently in London and also Dublin.
Wow.
And we're just missing Breffney, who's
yes,
actor, producer, person, also in Love Plus. Actually, the face of Love Plus.
And she's currently in London.
Yeah. In quarantine or lockdown.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question, from looking at your lovely website, which I've shared in the bit for the film of this, there seems to be a significant shift between Love Plus and Everything Not Saved. Is that true, or is that just my interpretation? And has the intention and motivation for making work together changed over the course? Is that
I'll jump in on that
question?
No, not at all.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think with all companies generally, where you sort of have a shared voice, it's a bit of a balancing act. Where and when we wrote a program note for Everything Not Saved, we sort of addressed this between sort of continuity. You want to say, hey, it's still us, and sort of innovation, which is not sort of falling into self-parody of, hey, this is exactly the thing we did last time. And I think, I don't know, I certainly would feel very calm and relaxed and happy about the arc we've had, because I don't think we're particularly angsty about our past work. I know I'm still really proud of all of it, and it's not so much that we've moved on from it as maybe things have come into focus. So there has been a huge change from every show, but I think that's generally us been going, we really loved that about that. And I think the reason we loved it is because blah, which means that next time maybe we should double down on that and sort of really put that front and center. So the stuff that we really care about, sort of moving, I think, into the foreground. I think that's the arc, and finding a language which is a little bit playful and a little bit weird and a little bit thoughtful. If that makes sense.
It's a beautiful answer, Dylan. Yeah. Anyone want to add to that, or will we move on to our next?
The shows are also they're kind of reactionary to the means available and the time that we've been, so everything that saved for us was the commission that we got off the back of Love Plus. So Love Plus happened and they said, oh, we like this, we'd like to see something else. And then we sort of happened to make 2 shows between them, but that was it felt like a completion of an arc or something. And because of that, we had a little bit more backing and support. We had a small bit more funding. I think we tried to find a new ambition. We also knew what space we were making it for, whereas before we'd made shows to kind of fit into a small box and send them on tour and fringes and things. Whereas that way we knew it was going into Project Cube. That was the space it would always be made for. So that, I think, changed. The material realities of that changed, both in terms of budget and planning and also knowing really what space it would belong in and sit in, which I think was kind of informed it as well.
And you've also toured very far out of Ireland. I don't know if a lot of people realise that. I mean, it's brilliant.
We got to Beijing before we got to Cork.
Yeah.
No, we got to Cork.
Yeah, and the way
we haven't been to Cork.
Yeah, the way we've got to Beijing twice.
Why?
Twice, yeah, somehow, yeah. And the way things are going, it's been easier to do that than to come back to Dublin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant that you got there, but it's also mad that you didn't get to Cork first, or were touring internally in Ireland. Then, yeah.
The Beijing thing was like a massive stroke of luck, but a lot of the touring has been just following the opportunities. It hasn't been very strategic. It has just been like, this person from China sent us an email, and they seem to be a real person from China, and and like that, and that's the kind of Australian tour last year happened as well. It's just, we've been lucky with the chances we've got, and we've done all we could to make those happen. So that's kind of how that has worked, and we haven't been to Cork.
You want to go to Cork?
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
We wish Culture Ireland would send us to Cork.
Virtually, maybe at the moment, we don't know. Yeah. So following on with me weird questions, is there a particular process you work through every time, or does it change from show to show?
Definitely not.
No,
I mean, it's a follow-up to what Molly and Dylan were both just articulating. It really varies on what we have available to us. It's also dependent on the personnel, because as a collective of 7 with designers and writers and producers in-house, we are very self-sufficient in our own right, but only to a certain extent. I mean, for a long time, John and I were kind of sharing, and Dylan sometimes sharing the load of sound design or AV or whatever. So as we grow, and depending on what we want to prioritize in a production, we will employ other collaborators, and now we have some more regular collaborators that work with us. So, I mean, just by virtue of the people in the room, that will always change from project to project.
I mean, there are kind of blocks that we return to though in the process. Like we'll always start off with most of the company just thinking and talking together about the topic that we want to look at. So, with Everything Not Saved, it started off with like conversations about like not recording and how effective that is and how ineffective that is, which then becomes a process of kind of playing with those ideas, so that's why it's great to have the designers and performers and writers in the company in the room from the start, because it means that like you can all be informing each other all the time. And then generally that kind of goes to, we as Dylan was saying, we kind of have the tracks laid so the words can kind of come, and then it starts to look a bit more like a traditional rehearsal process after that. It's kind of the rough beats, but like there's within that there's a lot of shades of different colors,
Yeah. You're all amazing, by the way.
We're class too, V.
Major fans of yours.
Yeah, just really nice. Okay, so do you have a favourite moment in presenting work, or maybe talk to us about a moment that still moves you when you think about it, and share a bit about why?
I feel really lucky because I always get to perform the shows. So I have kind of relationships with moments or pieces of text that I always look forward to. And I always know I'm going to get something out of them. And I think one that comes to mind for me is at the end of Jericho, which was our third show that we made. Is that right? Third show. There's a moment at the end where my character, who's a journalist, has a conversation with her mother around the repeal referendum. And it's one side of the conversation is via text message that pops up as AV on stage, and then I speak the other side into a mic lying on the floor. And it's kind of at a moment in the show where everything's fallen apart. And the conversation just rings so true, I think, for so many people, that every time it happens, I just feel this kind of like truck of emotion with me. No matter how far away we get from the actual moment in history that it happened, it still it brings all of that, those months back in that one moment. It's really, I find that moment really beautiful.
Thank you.
I have a moment that I always remember. Me and Claire often end up watching the shows together because the actors are doing the acting, and John is normally operating the lights. And so in tech and dress rehearsals, we sometimes sit beside each other and go, is it all going to work? What's going to happen now? And I remember watching Everything That's Saved. The first moment we tried to bring out the sort of final image at the end, which was this kind of quite abstract idea we'd all had in our heads, and sort of thrown a lot of ideas at, and we'd recruited sort of volunteer performers, and we'd put them into these mad costumes, and we just hadn't quite figured out if it was going to work or not. And we sat there and watched it, and it was a bit iffy, and then we watched it a second time with some alteration and went, oh yeah, no, okay, that's going to work. And that sort of fizzy excitement of just being like, oh no, I really want people to see this now. This is going to be good. When you realize that this sort of slightly madcap idea you've been pursuing, that there was something at the end of the tunnel, you hadn't just gone down a rabbit hole and realized that you needed to turn around. That's kind of a fun, that fizz of excitement when you then realize that you are looking forward to sharing it with an audience rather than just being terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I happened to be in the room at that moment as well, because that was, I think, in the last tech session of Everything Not Saved, and it was on in Dublin Fringe. So like that stage in the production is normally when I'm running around town trying to buy weird things or trying to get the last few tickets sold or whatever. So I just kind of happened to walk in. I think I'd been sent to buy bananas for a fruit bowl that was on the stage. So I came back in with the bananas and the oranges, and then this moment like happened, and it was just like, oh yeah, cool, that's really cool. The show's in an hour, so I'm glad that it's cool. You know, I don't know what we're gonna do otherwise. That was a good one. Or
actually, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say that even though we didn't get to do Hot House, the day where everything was cancelled was very strange and a lot was going on. And I was working on the festival as well as the show, so I hadn't been in the Hot House rehearsal room all that much. But on that day, the guys did a final run in rehearsals, and I ran from project to the rehearsal room to go and get to see it. And it was so strange and emotional, but it was the first time I'd seen a full run of the show since the first reading, so it had kind of come a long way. So that was a big, huge emotional thing as well, because I hadn't seen it in so long, and I was like, oh, this is deadly. This was gonna be deadly. And it was a weird one, because it was I don't know when it's gonna get to be deadly again, but I was like, this is gonna happen one way or another. So that was cool.
And it will. Yeah. And
you can see it.
Who's next? Dylan, will I go to you next?
Yeah, I was going to bounce off what Maeve was saying there about that moment at the end of... about what Molly was saying about the end of Everything Not Saved there. And when I was thinking about this question, there was a moment a little before that for me, which is always very, close to my heart, is when we're actually making the shows and when you hit on the thing that it needs to be, because... I think the way our stuff works is there tend to be lots of ideas on the go, and it's about finding a frame that can hold them all. Because we really like character, we really like plot, we really like all of those traditional things that are supposed to be all you put in a play. And I think though what we're interested in is finding a shape that lets you do something different with them. And again, the image I'd come back to a lot is sort of like a stained glass window, which is you can see the picture, but you can also see all of these little abstract blocks that the picture is made up of, so that you've sort of got two levels of detail. And what you have to do is make sure that all of these cool little notions you have actually make a picture at the end. And when we were making ENS, we had all of this stuff in play for the last section about memory and rehearsals and performance. We didn't really have a way to get to the ending. And, you know, we were like, we quite like open-ended endings. You know, we sort of feel like false closure is worse than no closure. But even there, you sort of have to leave things open-ended in the right way. And then I remember being on Wikipedia and reading the page about Rasputin and just finding this one fact about his family, which just unlocked the whole ending. And I think we were in Maeve's living room, and you had Harley then, didn't you, Maeve?
No.
Oh, weird, because I've just done quite
Put Harley in the memory.
a show relevant thing, which is because the show is all about memory, and I'm now remembering Maeve's dog there at a point when Maeve didn't have her dog. I remember we were all sitting around in the living room. I found this thing and I read it out, and I could just see it landing on everyone's face and going, oh yeah, cool. We've got it now. We know what to do. And I think that's that really lovely moment, is sort of where you can feel the shape you can't see yet, and you know that everyone else has sort of like got their hands on the same elephant in the dark, you know, to use that.
In your false memory, did the realization land on Harley's face as well?
yeah. I think the really weird thing is, in the false memory, I'm holding Harley, even though I tend not to hold a dog because I'm bad with dogs. So that's really spooky and loud.
Very spooky.
But yeah.
You were holding Maeve.
Oh, Maeve.
Yeah, I remember it.
There's also, I mean, I think I am the person who's seen most Malaprop shows. I'm just doing the maths there of like, there's 23 performances I haven't seen, and then probably the guts of 100 I have, which means that I get to see the audience watch the show for the first time, which is what I kind of watch now, which is a really interesting experience. It's really interesting to watch. Literally people from all around the world resonating and not resonating with various parts of what we've tried to say, and you know, stuff that like maybe we've kind of gotten used to landing for the first time and stuff like that is really it's always gorgeous to watch. And I remember the first time when we did Everything Not Saved in Edinburgh, and the show kind of picked up just as we were getting into like rehearsing the other show that we were making at the same time, because we hate ourselves. Just as it started to pick up, so as kind of like the first wave of, oh God, what are we doing? This is mental. Just watching the audience come in and be like buzzed to see the show. That's class. And it's great to kind of have like, there's the big group, so we have that to share, but also like watching people come in and going, yeah, no, this is great. You're going to really like this. I'm really glad you're here to watch this. It's lovely. It's great to have that as well.
Yeah. Last one.
Oh, I'm doing one as well. Well, I mean, all of these are, brilliant and hugely pertinent in the memory box. To be honest, weirdly, one place my head went to there was when we made the film adaptation of Everything Not Saved, which I didn't direct because I was in Bristol and I also have no experience making a film. So Jana Kemperman, another collaborator, directed it, and she's brilliant, and I worked really closely with her on various aspects of it. And I managed to make it back for some of the shoot days. And I'll never forget, because normally I'm so, kind of in the middle of it all, and it's very hard to reflect on it when it's happening because it's so overwhelming. But in this case, I wasn't really doing anything except being supportive. So I was like watching, and the last sequence we were doing, which had to be shot late at night because it was summer and we needed it to be dark outside. It was this massive chase sequence that I had written into the things. I was like simultaneously feeling really guilty and not able to help at all. And it was this big, I can't even remember how we did it, but it was like sprinting and seeing all these installations in
Turned
rooms.
around.
It was really high octane. Yeah, and then we had to flip it, and there was lots of actors that we hadn't worked with before and a big crew. It was a big endeavor. And I remember just watching it dressed in in costume because I was one of the extras, and just sort of watching from the sidelines and just being so proud of everybody and how we'd actually managed to do it. And it looked so like the finished product. We were so proud of it. And it was just a really nice moment of kind of stepping back and seeing the chaos for what it is. So that's my one, maybe.
Yeah, it's sort of that lovely terror of like, I feel quite a lot as the writer, which is of writing things into the script and then everybody taking your mad half-baked notions super seriously. You know,
Yeah.
it might be cool if this happened at this point, and then loads of people have to go off and cost it and reality check it, and that's sort of like a beautiful privilege, which should be a little bit scary, you know, is getting to make things up for a living.
Yeah.
The next question follows on from that a little bit because it's imaginary. So the question is, if you were going to, in the future unknown, make a work or hang out with Fatima Groups United Culture Club or start thinking about some sort of artistic collaboration with them, where would you start, or what might that look like?
I'll start on that one. That's cool.
Yeah, cool.
Which is just, I think Everything Not Saved is a good launch point there, because I mean it was all about memory, and I think one of the real hooks for the shape it ended up being was, I suppose, the difference between personal memory and sort of official history, and how much goes missing between the two. And I know I do lots of sort of situated or community work and work with young people and everything, and I think the thing you're always interested in, and the thing that's always really rich, is, I suppose, people talking about what they want to commemorate or what they want to be remembered because they suspect it's going to go missing. Or that it's going to be not just not remembered, but unremembered. It's going to be suppressed or papered over. And I think that for me is a really rich starting point. Is what do you care about and what do you feel is at risk, and that sort of gives you drama because it's love and fear, you know, sort of bouncing off each other. That makes sense.
It makes me cry, Dylan. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I don't know. Does anyone else want to jump in on that, or because I can get a bit more specific?
I mean, keep going if you're making Veronica cry. Yeah.
But I mean, I think going back to what I was saying there, just about character and plot, which is I can't remember. There's some UK press we got that was saying our work is sort of unusual for devised work, in that there tend to be very well formed, distinct characters, but that we tend to love them and leave them, so that we move on, and that the closure of the show, or that the arc of the show tends not to be about bringing those characters to a point of everything's fine now. And I kind of think, where am I going with that? Yeah, that goes back to that thing about, I think sometimes false closure can feel worse than no closure, and that if you go with traditional plot, if we start with these people, there's a demand for things to change. And actually so many of the problems we're dealing with right now are so big that having someone fix them in 90 minutes just can only feel false. And it's always that classic thing, which is it's really hard to write a classic play about a chronic problem in a very sort of literal sense. That word chronic, you know, through time, the suffering arises because it keeps going. And so in a way, if you offer an ending to that, on some level, you don't buy it. And so I think to that end, our approach has sort of become about juxtaposing characters, or juxtaposing different perspectives on sort of these huge phenomena we're all living through, in order to sort of like sketch the shape. You know, you can't hold the whole thing in your head, but you can sort of offer outlier positions that sort of mark the territory and go, here's where the thing is, here's the direction we should be facing, here's the direction we should sort of be looking in. And I kind of think in that sense of, you know, multiple perspectives sort of allow you to be more truthful than following one and offering sort of a happy ending. I think I was reading a little something about the group and social prescription, and that to me is a really rich starting point, because it's about the idea that there's no such thing as individual health, that you can't talk about health and well-being without talking about situation, without talking about circumstances, without talking about community. And that for me, I think is a really interesting sort of point of contact with the way we've been working, in terms of it makes sense to look at things, to try and put yourself in everybody's shoes all the time, basically. Does that make any kind of sense?
Yes.
Of course.
No,
Yeah.
Cool.
It's the dream that all these imaginary projects happen in the future. Yeah.
It's so nice.
It would be amazing, and it will happen somehow. Okay, so these are the kind of short answer kind of things. What inspires you in any medium, in any in anything?
That's a hard question.
Each other, it seems. Like, it just seems, talking to you today, that you inspire each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've been really inspired by people who are going out of their way to practice solidarity at the moment. Like, I'm finding it really impressive, just because like the whole pandemic situation is so fucked in a lot of the US, that obviously that's horrific. But if you kind of zoom in closer, you're seeing really amazing work happening in like Brooklyn or kind of smaller suburban areas, where groups who have been marginalized or have had reason to cooperate before, and have been making these really brilliant mutual aid groups and really effective groups to kind of help and combat the lack of action by the rest of their state. And you know, like it's coming from a really dark place, but I think their individual stuff, the work they're doing, is really amazing as a reference to anyone who wants to kind of practice solidarity.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Less artistic and more just like the world is on fire and these people are putting out some fires.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that that's where your head went first, because it is a little bit more abstract as an inspiration. But yeah, totally, I'm with you.
Really short one, which is reading wise. Kim Stanley Robinson books always sort of give me a bit of a kick because they're both huge in scope and just really, really compassionate and human on a simple level. You know, there's a real love all through his works. And then I'm getting to work at the moment, a bit like yourself, on Zoom a lot. I'm working with young people and writers groups, and I love working with young people because they just they're very able and they have far fewer preconceptions about writing. Well, that's not true, because actually what happens is most of the time you tell them write a story and they write you like a Hollywood screenplay. But then actually once they get into writing about their experience, they tend to do so in a really fresh, unmediated, sort of raw and quite beautiful, if lumpy way. So I love working with young people. That sort of always switches my brain on and gets it going in 8 different directions.
Yeah.
I find
sorry, go on, Molly.
design practice, I find like large scale installation based art very inspiring, because I think it feels so theatrical. You know, when you have artists like maybe Ai Weiwei or big Yayoi Kusuma exhibitions or big Olafur Eliasson, the ones that are really popular that get Instagrammed a lot, but it's people, they fill up Instagram feeds, but it's also for a reason, because people go and they have some sort of very immediate, very engaged reaction with a space that they feel they want to document and share, and I guess perhaps culturally perform via the internet, but also but there's a sort of engagement in that, which I think sometimes theatre design loses because it's often so removed. And I find that quite exciting. Like, what are the things which really inspire and excite, from children to old people, that they travel 2 hours to go to a museum to look at something? And often it's like big graphic colors, big shapes, simple repeats. It is actually quite, a lot of it's quite simple and very affecting, and I find that quite interesting in terms of how people engage with visual propositions in design.
Lovely. I love the scale of these, like the America, all over the world. I love it.
All over the map.
All over. Okay, so what gives you hope? And we can mix hope and joy, whatever.
Hope and joy.
Yeah.
I think something that I've really been struck by over the last few weeks is kind of, to echo John, the solidarity, but more specifically within the theatre community in Ireland. Like the day that we realised where we live wasn't going to go ahead and Hot House wasn't going to happen, I got messages from like people who I'd only maybe spoken to twice in my life, saying, you know, how sorry they were, checking in with me, asking if there was anything that they could do for me. And I was like really, really touched by that. And I've seen that just again and again, just how supportive everyone is. And, you know, even the Civic doing their fundraiser for artist grants, and people kind of taking stuff into their own hands. I find that really, really joyful. And it's obviously coming out of a place that's very dangerous for a lot of people, and people are really, really worried, and rightly so. But I think it's kind of a thing where, like, Irish people are amazing and they're so kind and they really want to do good things. And I think when we're in our like daily grind, we kind of forget that about ourselves. And I think sometimes it takes something happening, like a big change, to make us kind of come back to that place where people are organizing community groups and looking after each other. And it's just very holistic at the moment. So even though there's a lot of awful things happening, that's something that I find a lot of hope in.
I've got a really small scale and a really large scale thing. So small scale, I've had my cat, who's a grown-up cat, for about a year now, and she's taken a while to get very comfortable to us. But now she started hopping up on the table when I'm working and kind of just hanging out with me a bit more. She doesn't cuddle, but I'm hopeful that in the next little while we might get to the point where I can actually have a cuddle with my cat. So that's small. And then large scale, I'm really hoping we come out of this pandemic with a whole new view on the way capital works, and the end of believing money is real.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm hopeful of both of those things equally. And that's,
Same timelines.
yeah, different timelines, different, you know, but equally important to me.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
The reinvention. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say similar. I've found the like kind of kindness and just like people going out of their way to be nice to people at the moment, like even in small ways, just like going out of their way to say nice things to people or do a nice thing, or, you know, that kind of thing, as well as the kind of taking things to their own hands and people seeing that something needs to be done and doing it and acting on it and not waiting for someone else to start the fundraiser or whatever. You know, there's a lot of kind of grassroots stuff going on. So like John, I just kind of hope that people remember all of those attitudes when we all have to start making things work again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, I was just going to say very briefly that I'm feeling really restored by passion at the moment. Like, and it doesn't need to be passion with a product, passion where someone's like, oh, I love making music, and so I've put down this awesome track. But just even like rants online would have previously, you know, not been something I'd engage in. Not that I'd be responding, but even just seeing people, I mean, knowing what my day-to-day is like, which is just very chill, very mellow, like just trying to stay on top of things in really micro ways, which is, you know, totally fine for me right now. I love seeing people kind of getting worked up about various things that they love and they care about, and I'm just glad that that passion exists and will be there when we need it to be.
Yeah. I love that.
Last week I found myself getting, I went on an internet rant last Friday, which is something I basically never ever would have done before, and I absolutely lost it after the Arts Council announcement last week. I was like ranting to everyone, like on chat and on the phone and stuff for hours. I did a big sarcastic Twitter thread, and then I was like energized by it. I hadn't had that many like thoughts and feelings and opinions. I hadn't cared about something that much in ages. And I find it very energizing, like physically energizing, to the extent that I went for a run afterwards. I'd like had to put that energy somewhere. But it was also like, you know, I know like I've been lucky in that this time has meant that I've been able to take a bit of a break, and I haven't had to work like low, or like I generally do workloads, but you know, that kind of stopped quite suddenly. So I've been able to physically rest, but you know, I'd been working so hard on my job for ages, and then it was cancelled, and you know, I was kind of thinking about like, what is this? Why do I do this? Like, what's the crack? Do I need to do this? Maybe I should just like be a florist or something totally different and change the rhythm of my life totally. But then that on Friday I was like, oh no, I do actually really, really care about this, and like I've got so angry about it. So that was energizing and kind of hopeful in a way that I hadn't expected either.
I'd just chime in on the I think the level of care on the go really gives me hope. And there's there was a section, I think, in Hot House, which someday we will all see, sort of responding to that idea that care is the fundamental job that underlies all other jobs, and that the more we get distracted from that, the more dangerous it is. That sort of we have to work at keeping everybody okay. And I mean, I feel bad because I've sort of taken the piss, but I quite like, in a way, the way in which we've all started thinking about our email salutations, you know, because it had become a joke that, you know, no email has ever found me well, because we felt how perfunctory that sort of little gesture towards someone else's humanity was at the start of an email, which was then going to go on to wreck their head with like sort of 12 business things. And now actually we're using them again, because I think the cultural mindset has shifted to where we're going, oh, everybody's vulnerable. Fundamentally, everybody's health is at stake, everybody's well-being is at stake, and keeping everybody okay is something we're having to work at, rather than everybody's fine until they come in with their arm falling off, or until they come in to A&E bleeding out. And so silly little signs like email salutations, I think, do actually sort of give me hope, because they go, oh yeah, we're getting better at looking after each other.
Yeah, and all this people who are putting signs in the window, like just telling the general world, you know, that it's going to be okay, or to feel better, or to say hello, or whatever. I think that's a good thing, a hopeful thing.
Okay, so the last thing, do you have a message for Fatima Group's United Culture Club?
Keep her lit.
Look after yourselves.
Yeah, mind yourself.
Yeah, mind yourself.
I look forward to meeting you at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say, I look forward to meeting them when we get to do Hot House again.
Yeah.
And when we get to make our big super collaboration show.
Yeah. Woo.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Malaprop. You're legends.
Thank you, V.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.